My name's Howard Creek, and I've been asked to talk to you about responding to a chemical or biological incident as a first responder. I'll talk about three areas. The first two relate to preparing to be a first responder, and then discuss a little about actually being a first responder. First, in order to prepare to become a first responder, you need to develop a series of possible incidents and prepare tabletop exercises for your response teams. To develop these incident scenarios, I would recommend that you sit down with your emergency teams, your fire department, your police department, the hospital staff, and take some time and brainstorm a series of possible chemical and biological incidents. While I was in the Air Force, I was the deputy base commander for a large industrial complex. At this complex, we had numerous chemicals on base, so we developed scenarios where there would be a fire at a facility housing these chemicals, a vehicle accident carrying chemicals on the base roads, and a natural disaster damaging the buildings housing chemicals. We also developed scenarios where a disgruntled employee brought a biological agent onto the base and exposed workers to the agent. Our first response team developed a series of about 10 to 12 different scenarios. All of the first response agencies, the fire department, police, hospital, and safety office, plus our base support agencies, such as public affairs, civil engineering, facility managers, were used to develop these first response checklists corresponding to each scenario. After developing the checklist, we held a tabletop exercise to practice the responses and fine-tune the checklists. Every month, we held an exercise for one of the scenarios. Many of these exercises were tabletop exercises, but at least once a quarter, we held a live exercise. In the Air Force, we had an Inspector General and a safety office that were responsible for conducting and evaluating exercises. They would coordinate the exercise with the base agencies to ensure the least amount of disruption to the workforce. However, some disruptions are necessary in order to accurately simulate a chemical or biological incident. The exercises lasted 2 to 4 hours. The Inspector General monitored the exercise and ensured everyone followed the checklist and issued a report at the end of the exercise. In the military, the base commander or deputy base commander is always the on-scene commander. However, generally the fire department or the police department are the actual first responders to the incident. The first responder will analyze the situation and begin to deal with the situation to protect lives and property. They also establish an entry control point, which is always upwind from the incident area and will be the appropriate distance from the incident depending on the situation. Within a few minutes, the on-scene commander should arrive at the entry control point, obtain a situation report from the first responder, and at this point take charge of the situation. Within a few minutes, all other first response teams should arrive at the entry control point. The on-scene commander begins directing response team members to accomplish their checklist items. It was my experience that the fire department, police, and medical staff dealt with life and property issues, such as saving lives, rendering medical attention, containing the chemical or biological situation, extinguishing fires, and establishing a safety perimeter. They do this very well since they are trained to respond to these situations. On-scene commander makes the appropriate decision if there is a potential conflict between the first responders. In the scenario where multiple things were occurring simultaneously, your first responders had to decide on which had the highest priority. Examples would be if the situation is where there is a police incident and a chemical incident, or a fire and a chemical incident, or an aircraft accident and a chemical incident. In these situations, the on-scene commander makes the decision on who has the highest priority. This is obviously based on the experience from the fire department and the police department and the medical response teams. It is the responsibility of the on-scene commander to make the appropriate decision where to place the resources in order to save the most lives and to protect the most property. The on-scene commander would also coordinate all support agencies as needed to support first responders. Some examples of this might be the need for a building manager to help evacuate buildings and account for the number of people in the buildings, obtaining heavy construction equipment to support the first responders, or obtaining additional resources from local agencies. Another very important support resource is your public affairs person. Since most media sources listen to emergency radio frequencies in order to get news stories, it's important for the public affairs person to have accurate information in order to develop a press release to the media and to control media that might gain access to the area. They will also help you if you're asked to make a statement for the media. The media will want a statement or a live interview, so I recommend you practice, since this is often an uncomfortable situation for many first responders. It has been my experience that you need to practice these scenarios frequently. I can attest to this, since during my tour as a deputy base commander, I had to respond to at least 6 actual chemical spills and 1 aircraft accident. I was fortunate since none of these incidents resulted in loss of life, but I had many colleagues who had to respond to natural disasters, such as tornadoes, with resulting fires, chemical spills, and building damages, where major injuries and major loss of life actually happened. Many of my colleagues had to respond to fires, aircraft and vehicle accidents, and other type of natural disasters, and deal with chemical spills or potentially hazardous to base personnel. Without a great deal of practice, I and my colleagues would not have been prepared to be an effective on-scene commander. So in summary, I feel it's very important to develop good scenarios, perform frequent tabletop exercises, and then practice, 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 so that you and everyone on our team is prepared in the event of a real incident.